For the first time in 5 years, I left a trade show a day early. I work for a telecommunications company, and every year we attend 3 trade shows held in different cities around the country, each lasting 5 days. We set up our booth on Sunday and Monday, with the show starting on Tuesday morning and ending at lunchtime on Thursday. For the past 5 years, I have worked diligently at every trade show until Thursday afternoon when the last box was packed and loaded onto the truck. But during my last show in May at the San Diego Convention Center, I sprained my ankle on Tuesday night and was unable to work in our booth the next day. At lunch on Wednesday, my boss told me there was no point in staying at the show if I couldn't work and asked me to find a flight home. I didn't have to be told twice. I flew back to St. Louis at 2 that afternoon. Before boarding the flight in San Diego, I called home and left a message for Barbara, my wife of 9 years, informing her I would be home by 8 o'clock that evening. Barbara had been upset with me about something before I left on the trip, but she didn't want to discuss it at the time, suggesting we deal with it upon my return. Despite disliking the sprained ankle and my boss telling me to go home before the conference was over, I was glad to be getting home early to find out what was bothering my wife. When my taxi stopped in front of the house, I noticed a black Cadillac in our driveway. I didn't know anyone who drove a Cadillac, and it bothered me a little that Barbara would have company at the house when she knew I was coming home. I thought she would be anxious to discuss whatever problem she thought we had. Entering the front door, I heard voices in the family room. Stepping into the kitchen and peeking into the family room, I got the shock of my life. Barbara was sitting on the sofa with my best friend, Bob Williams. This itself was not the shock. The fact that Barbara's blouse was unbuttoned was what struck me so hard. Barbara and Bob hadn't seen me yet as I walked through the kitchen and stood at the edge of the family room. I exclaimed, questioning the situation unfolding before me. Barbara, taken aback by my sudden appearance, inquired about my unexpected return. Her expression and the fact that she didn't bother concealing the unbuttoned blouse hinted at an odd anticipation of this moment. I further inquired about the situation, seeking an explanation. Barbara, wearing a smile, assured me that it wasn't what I thought. As I grappled with the surrealness of the moment, the pain in my ankle served as a harsh reminder, dispelling any doubts about the reality of the situation. During my brief time in the room, Bob remained motionless, staring at me with an amused expression. I had reached my limit. Despite Bob's size and the pain in my ankle, I was determined to eject him from my house. Taking a step toward the sofa, I suddenly found myself in the grip of another man. His approach was silent, and he swiftly grabbed my right arm, twisting it up behind my back, while his left arm formed a chokehold around my neck. I could still breathe, but the threat to cut off my airway loomed. Barbara made a declaration, asserting that I now comprehended the situation. She revealed that they had been anticipating my arrival. To initiate their peculiar celebration, Bob had divulged details about my actions at business shows, prompting Barbara to question if I thought she would never uncover my indiscretions or if I believed she wouldn't be affected. She expressed her hurt and intentions for revenge, outlining a plan to derive pleasure from Bob and Harper while I observed my attempts to explain were thwarted. As the man restraining me covered my mouth and nose, the smell overwhelmed me, and soon I felt consciousness slipping away. I awoke tied spread eagle to the bed in the guest bedroom, my injured ankle throbbing as if pressed against a hot iron. Speaker wire secured my wrists and ankles tightly, cutting off circulation. Momentarily forgetting Barbara's earlier words, I was reminded when I heard voices on the television at the end of the bed. Looking at the screen, I saw Barbara sitting and dressed with Bob. Barbara, addressing the camera, expressed her hope that I was awake. She intended to showcase a significant tool she planned to enjoy. Bob was granted the initial opportunity due to his revelation of my infidelity and assistance in orchestrating the situation. Barbara then summoned Harper to display his own impressive tool. Harper, the man who had seized me, joined in and wished me to appreciate the upcoming spectacle. He mentioned the recording of the event, allowing me the option to watch it repeatedly at my leisure. At that moment, I cared little about Barbara's actions. Our marriage was over. My priority was freeing myself from the bindings. Concerned about the lack of blood circulation to my hands and feet, uncertain of when Barbara and her friends would finish, I wasn't willing to wait. I began pulling with my left leg, enduring the pain, pausing for 30 seconds, and then repeating the process. After several attempts, I gave one hard yank, and the wire snapped. Observing a bleeding left ankle, the injuries appeared manageable. Following that, I attended to my right leg, a more challenging task due to the sprained right ankle. Breaking the wires on my right leg resulted in substantial skin tearing, leading to significant bleeding. With liberated legs, I eased the strain on my arms, but the wire knots resisted loosening. Armed only with my teeth, I attempted to break the wires binding my wrist, mirroring the process used on my ankles. Upon freeing my right wrist, it bled nearly as profusely as my right ankle. Having both legs and my right arm free, I easily broke loose from the last of my bindings. My left wrist sustained minor cuts, causing slight bleeding. Once free, I observed ongoing bleeding from injuries to both ankles and wrists. A search for makeshift bandages in the room yielded nothing, and the bedsheet was a disarray of blood, surprising me with its quantity. Attempting to stand, dizziness forced me to sit down again. Now my head pounded, my face ached, and I felt nauseous. With closed eyes, I tried to settle my stomach when I heard my name. Initially, I thought Barbara had entered the room, but upon opening my eyes, I recognized that she was addressing me through the television. She asked if I was watching what was unfolding on the screen. Turning my gaze to the television, I observed Barbara involved in closeness acts with Bob, with them positioned in on all fours style. Briefly considering whether Barbara believed I would derive pleasure from watching her, I knew that comprehending my current anger would drive her away. Exiting the bed, I swung my right arm toward the television, causing blood to splatter across the screen. Turning away, I saw my reflection in the mirror, revealing a prominent bruising bump on my forehead consisting of 4 small lumps resembling knuckle marks. In disbelief, I processed the fact that my wife orchestrated a scenario where I was befuddled, maltreated, and tied to a bed, only for her to engage in closeness acts with my former best friend and an unfamiliar acquaintance. Thoughts of grabbing a baseball bat crossed my mind, but I hesitated, considering my weakened state. Lingering dizziness from the medication and uncertainty about Bob and his friend overpowering me restrained my impulsive reaction. Additionally, the potential consequences, including causing damage or loss of life, deterred me from taking drastic measures. Examining the room's chaos once more, an idea began to form. I smeared blood on the bedposts and pillows, then created two smeared, parallel lines of blood on the carpet going from the side of the bed to the door. I proceeded across the hall to the guest bathroom and located gauze and adhesive tape under the sink. Before leaving the bathroom, I ensured there was no blood left in the sink, on the cabinet door, or on the floor. Fortunately, our house had the master bedroom downstairs, alleviating concerns about Barbara or her companions overhearing me. Returning to the bedroom, I utilized my training to administer first aid to myself. I wrapped both ankles and my left wrist, leaving only the injuries to my right wrist exposed. Then, picking up the cordless phone by the bed, I made sure to get blood on it and dialed emergency. Upon the emergency operator's response, I urgently pleaded for help, expressing my fear that they were going to eliminate me. Overwhelmed by the situation, I exclaimed, "Oh God!" Keeping the connection intact, I let the phone fall to the floor along with the gauze and tape I had grabbed. I made my way down the back stairway that led to the garage and left the house, passing by the car in the driveway. I smeared some blood on the driver's door handle and left my bloody handprint on the trunk lid. Afterward, I walked over to the empty lot across the driveway. I smeared some blood on the driver's door handle and left my bloody handprint on the trunk lid. Afterward, I walked over to the empty lot across the street, found a hiding place behind some bushes and sat down to await the unfolding events. While waiting, I bandaged my right wrist. The wait was brief and within 5 minutes the first police car arrived. 2 officers disembarked and approached the house while a second car pulled in and its officers headed to the back. While the officers at the front door waited, one of them rang the doorbell, waited, rang it again, and after another 30 seconds, pounded on the door. The front porch light illuminated and Barbara opened the door. From my vantage point, it seemed like she might have been startled when she saw the police at the door, though I was too far away to discern her expression. The officers informed her about an emergency call from the address a few minutes ago and inquired about the nature of that call. Barbara denied any knowledge of an emergency call and insisted she was alone in the house. The officers pressed further, not accepting her response. Barbara maintained that she was home alone, explaining that her husband was out of town at a business show. However, Barbara's situation took a turn for the worse when the 2 officers returning from the back revealed Bob and Harper in custody. The officer holding Bob declared, "Look who we found sneaking out the back door." Witnessing Bob and Harper, Barbara seemed to lose her composure, sliding down against the door casing until she sat on the floor. An officer assisted Barbara to her feet and escorted her back inside. Meanwhile, the other officers ushered Bob and Harper into the house. Unfortunately, I couldn't witness the events inside, but imagine the scene when the police opened the door to the guest bedroom, into the house. Unfortunately, I couldn't witness the events inside, but imagine the scene when the police opened the door to the guest bedroom, revealing the mess. The shocked look on Barbara's face upon discovering my absence would be priceless. Yearning to sneak across and get into the car's trunk, I refrained from risking visibility. 10 minutes of silence passed, followed by a crescendo of noise and confusion. 2 more police cars arrived with sirens and lights. Subsequently, Bob and Harper were led out in handcuffs, vehemently arguing they did nothing to the woman's husband. The pair was placed in the back seat of separate cars and driven away. Meanwhile, police officers closely inspected the car in the driveway. The blood on the driver's door handle was swiftly noticed, followed by the discovery of blood on the trunk lid. An officer retrieved the car keys from Harper's car and opened the trunk. I truly wished I could have been in the trunk when he opened it, but as it turned out, it didn't matter. The officer inspecting the trunk called another officer over, and then a third. "We have weapons and medications here," the officer called out to a plainclothes officer who had just arrived on the scene. 3 MAC-10s and about a kilo of what appears to be cocaine. Over the next 20 minutes, I observed as the police photographed the trunk contents of Harper's car and had the car towed away. The 2 cars carrying Bob and Harper left car and had the car towed away. The 2 cars carrying Bob and Harper left, and shortly afterward, Barbara emerged from the house in handcuffs, placed into a patrol car, and driven away. Police officers remained in the house, and I watched as they secured the front door with crime scene tape. I decided then that it was time for me to leave. I walked through the empty lot to the street behind, and then, keeping to the shadows, I walked the 10 blocks to a shopping center with a McDonald's restaurant. I realized that I looked pretty messed up, with bloody bandages on my wrists and ankles and a black and blue goose egg on my forehead. But I needed to get off the street for a while, and I had just enough change in my pocket to buy a large cup of coffee. When I walked into the restaurant, I expected everyone to stare at me, but as it turns out, I fit right in with the crowd in that particular McDonald's. There must have been 15 street people in there eating a burger or drinking coffee. No one paid any attention to me as I sat in a corner and drank my coffee. As I thought about what I had instigated, I couldn't help but smile. The image of Barbara, Bob, and Harper being questioned by the police almost made me laugh out loud. The police would be asking them what they did with my body, and of course they couldn't answer that question, and anything they did say would be assumed to be lies. The one problem I still had was how to reappear and not be accused of intentionally misleading the police. By the time I finished my coffee, I had an idea that I thought would work. When I took my empty coffee cup up to the counter to ask for a refill, the manager came over and told me he would refill my cup if I would then leave the restaurant. I accepted his offer with a fresh cup of coffee in hand. I started off on the 20-block walk to a park I was familiar with, ducking behind trees and shrubs whenever I saw a car coming. Considering the difficulty I had walking on my injured ankle, it took me nearly an hour to walk to the park. Once there, I found a picnic table in a dark corner and sat there until 3 o'clock in the morning. At that time, I removed my bandages and threw them in the trash. Then, I moved to the far side of the park and lay down in the grass next to a jogging trail. Despite the pain in my wrists and ankles, especially my right ankle, I was able to sleep on and off until the sun began to come up. I lay as still as I could, hoping that I might even fall asleep again as I waited for what I knew was going to happen. The park I was in was a favorite for joggers and people walking their dogs in the morning. I knew that I would soon be discovered by one of them. I was right, and within a half hour, I was in the back of an ambulance headed for the hospital. I had left my wallet on the bedside table in the guest room at home, so I had no identification when I got to the hospital. For some reason, I wasn't coherent when the doctors in the emergency room tried to find out who I was and what happened to me. I also had a hard time staying awake. I ensured that my charade didn't conclude prematurely, and it wasn't until almost noon that the police arrived. Pretending to be asleep until nearly 1 o'clock, I then prepared myself to talk. I had rehearsed what I would say and how I would respond to questions, to avoid straying too far from the truth. The plainclothes officer, Detective Jackson, approached and inquired if I was Mr. Oliver Grant. Confirming my identity, I agreed to answer his questions but expressed uncertainty about how much help I could be, emphasizing my lack of memory about the events. Detective Jackson explained that I was found in a park by a man walking his dog around 6 o'clock that morning and encouraged me to share what I did remember. I recounted returning home from a trip to San Diego the previous night, arriving a day earlier than planned. Upon entering the house, I discovered my wife talking to my best friend, Bob Williams. When I questioned them, someone grabbed me from behind, making it difficult for me to breathe. As my wife Barbara began yelling at me, I struggled to concentrate on her words due to my breathing difficulties. I believe they must have befuddled me because the next thing I recall is waking up in our guest bedroom, tied to the bed. I noticed bleeding where they had tied my wrists and ankles, and I was starting to lose sensation in my hands and feet. Despite my attempts to free myself, I ended up causing more damage to my wrists and ankles. It was during this time that I noticed the television on, broadcasting from the master bedroom. Barbara was engaged in closeness activities with Bob and another man, a large individual I had never seen before. I thought I heard them discussing their plans for me after they finished with my wife. Although my thinking was still a bit unclear, it sounded like they were contemplating eliminating me. I believed they were assaulting Barbara, and the intention was to eliminate both of us. That's when I successfully broke free from the wire used to tie me to the bed. Subsequently, I called emergency. Detective Jackson inquired about why I dropped the phone during that call. I explained that I dropped it when I realized Barbara was a willing participant. It seemed like I heard her say something like, "Go take care of that idiot." Fearing for my safety, I decided to attempt an escape from the house. However, I don't remember anything after that, even though I obviously managed to get out. Detective Jackson inquired if I recalled anyone hitting me, to which I responded that I didn't think so, but much of what happened was still a little hazy. Curious about my wife's perspective, I asked Jackson what Barbara was saying about the incident. He relayed that she claimed to have found out about my alleged infidelity during my business trips and wanted to teach me a lesson. According to her, I wasn't supposed to be injured and they planned to release me once she had sought her revenge. Intrigued, I asked if she mentioned where she got the idea that I cheated. Jackson explained that she said Mr. Williams told her about it, referring to me as a stupid pig. I expressed frustration that the only evidence she had of my alleged affair came from one person, the very person with whom she chose to seek revenge. I questioned Barbara's judgment, stating that I believed she was smarter than to fall for such manipulation. Jackson continued, and I confirmed that I had never was smarter than to fall for such manipulation. Jackson continued, and I confirmed that I had never cheated on my wife. I asserted that she could have easily asked me about it, and I could have proven that I hadn't cheated. Detective Jackson asked me a few questions to clarify some points, but he didn't challenge anything I had said. I was released from the hospital the following day. Upon returning home, there was a message on our answering machine from Barbara. She pleaded with me to come down to the police station and tell them it was all a misunderstanding. She needed me to post her bail so she could get out. I deleted the message and grabbed a beer from the refrigerator. The phone rang again, and it was Lisa Crawford, Barbara's best friend. Lisa, a divorcee, had been caught cheating by her husband, who promptly kicked her out. I never liked Lisa and didn't appreciate her influence on Barbara. Somehow, I knew she played a role in Barbara's actions. Lisa urgently insisted on talking to me, so out of curiosity, I invited her over. She arrived an hour later and informed me that she had spoken to Barbara. According to Lisa, Barbara was at her parents' house and accused me of cheating on her during my business trips. I vehemently denied the accusation, emphasizing that I had never cheated on her. Lisa mentioned that Barbara didn't provide many details, only stating that there was a misunderstanding and I had called the police, resulting in her arrest. In response, I recounted the same details to Lisa that I had shared with Detective Jackson, as most of it was the truth. Lisa pretended to be shocked, but she didn't turn against Barbara. She expressed disbelief, stating that such behavior was unlike Barbara, and suggested that she might be going through some kind of breakdown. Curious about my intentions, Lisa asked if I planned to talk to Barbara and give her a chance to explain her side of things. I responded that I might consider it, but I questioned why Barbara hadn't given me the same consideration. If she thought I was behaving improperly, why didn't she discuss it with me before taking such drastic actions? I inquired if Barbara had spoken to Lisa about the situation, to which Lisa replied in the negative, affirming that if Barbara had, she would have advised her to talk to me about it. I didn't believe that for a minute. I was pretty sure Lisa didn't think highly of me. so I doubted she would have objected to Barbara's revenge plan. Lisa mentioned that she didn't know what got into Barbara and advised me not to do anything until I had all the facts. I assured her that I wouldn't take any hasty actions. Lisa kissed me on the mouth and asked if there was anything she could do to help me. Despite being certain of her intentions, I feigned ignorance and told Lisa that she had already been a great help. I explained that I just needed some time alone. After Lisa left, I promptly contacted a lawyer and scheduled an appointment for that afternoon at 2 o'clock with Mason L. Townsend III. During the meeting, I briefly outlined Barbara's actions and expressed my desire for him to initiate divorce proceedings against her without delay. I conveyed my preference for serving her with the divorce papers the very next day. Mr. Townsend, expressing concern, asked if I was sure I wanted to proceed so quickly before having all the facts. He suggested taking more time to think about it, citing his experience in handling divorces and the potential for saving marriages if couples spent more time considering their decisions. I acknowledged Mr. Townsend's suggestion, agreeing that perhaps I should give the situation more time. Expressing satisfaction, he was glad that I was willing to consider waiting. I suggested postponing the service of divorce papers on Barbara to the day after tomorrow, deviating from my initial plan to serve them the next day. Mr. Townsend appeared a bit perplexed, questioning the change in timeline and expressing concerns about moving too fast. In response, I asserted that if he wasn't willing to act promptly on my behalf, I could easily find another lawyer who would. Mr. Townsend acquiesced, agreeing to have the papers served on my wife the day after tomorrow. I provided him with Barbara's location at her parents' house and her work address for the legal proceedings. Upon leaving his office, I felt numb, except of course from my right ankle that was still hurting like a son of a weapon. Right after leaving Mr. Townsend's office, I went to the bank and closed all of our joint accounts and canceled our joint credit cards. Then, I opened new accounts in my name only. I knew that eventually, I would probably have to give her half of the money, but I was going to make her work for it. Over the next couple of weeks, Barbara attempted to contact me multiple times at both work and home, but I chose not to answer any of her calls. Eventually, my lawyer informed me that Barbara intended to contest the divorce unless I agreed to a meeting where she could present her side of the story. I informed Mr. Townsend III that I needed some time to consider this. After more than a month, I contacted Mr. Townsend III again to inquire if Barbara still insisted on a meeting before agreeing to the divorce. He expressed surprise at the delay and promised to check with her attorney. Later that day, Mr. Townsend III informed me that Barbara indeed still wanted a meeting. I provided instructions for Mr. Townsend III to convey to my wife. I told him to inform her that I would not agree to a face-to-face meeting. I provided instructions for Mr. Townsend III to convey to my wife. I told him to inform her that I would not agree to a face-to-face meeting. If she chose to contest the divorce, that was acceptable, but the proceedings would be put on hold until she was ready to agree to the divorce. During this period, we would remain legally married, but I would neither see nor speak to her. I emphasized the clarity of my stance, and Mr. Townsend III assured me that he would communicate my response to Barbara. The next day, I visited Bob's wife Clara. She invited me inside and offered a drink. As we sat on the sofa, she began apologizing for Bob's actions, but I interrupted her, stating that she wasn't responsible for what Bob did, just as I wasn't responsible for what Barbara did. I emphasized that they were accountable for their own actions. Clara acknowledged my point, but expressed feeling bad about what had happened to me. She then suggested that we might find comfort in each other. I responded playfully, mentioning that I had always found her attractive and that had I met her when I was single, I might have asked her out. Before I could finish, Clara leaned in and kissed me, expressing her interest in the idea. She led me to the bedroom, where we engaged in slow and deliberate lovemaking. Afterward, Clara whispered into my ear that she would be open to getting together again for comfort and admitted that she loved what was happening between us. In the following week, I received a call from the district attorney's office. Andrew Hartley, the assistant handling the cases against my wife Bob Williams and Harper Mathers, inquired about my wife's attorney's statement that I might not press charges. I clarified that it was not correct and that I hadn't discussed the matter with anyone. I really don't know what I should do. I know that my wife was involved in what happened to me, but I don't know if she had planned to have me befuddled and maltreated or to have me tied up. I think she did, but I can't prove that. Befuddled and maltreated or to have me tied up. I think she did, but I can't prove that. I also don't know who tied me to the bed so tightly that I was losing circulation to my hands and feet. I'm not asking that any charges be dropped. I'll leave it up to you to decide what to do with these people. In the end, everyone got what they deserved. Harper was convicted of assault and kidnapping along with felony medication possession, and another felony for the weapons found in the trunk of his car. Bob pleaded guilty to assault, and Barbara pleaded guilty to conspiracy to commit unlawful restraint. I think they made that one up, just for her. Bob got 1 year at a minimum security prison, and Harper got hard time at a maximum security prison. Barbara got off the easiest. She was put on probation. In spite of the light sentence Barbara got, it was still considered to be a felony conviction. She no longer had any say in the matter of our divorce. I got rid of her but kept the house and all of our savings. A month after our divorce, Lisa approached me and suggested that I talk to Barbara. According to Lisa, Barbara wanted to explain her actions and offer an apology. Although I acted reluctant to meet with Barbara, I was secretly curious to hear what she had to say. Lisa convinced me to meet Barbara at a cocktail lounge about a mile from my house. As Barbara slid into the booth across from me, she expressed gratitude for my willingness to see her. She began apologizing for what she had done, explaining that she had just found out about my alleged affairs during my trips. I promptly refuted her claim, stating that I had never cheated on her. Barbara appeared surprised and insisted that, at the time, she believed Bob's assertion that I was cheating. She explained that she was hurt and angry, causing her to lose perspective. I questioned her logic, pointing out that she already suspected me of infidelity when I asked her what was bothering her before my last trip, yet she didn't share her concerns. Barbara admitted that she should have communicated sooner but needed time to process. Mockingly, I highlighted the absurdity of her beliefs and actions, pointing out that she had only Bob's word and didn't bother asking me directly. I questioned why she didn't approach me before planning her revenge and expressed skepticism about Bob's involvement. I sarcastically remarked on the quality of Bob's friends, including Harper. I discovered that Bob associated with medication dealers, which was unknown to me. I inquired about how Barbara allowed herself to be closeness with Harper under Bob's influence. Barbara blushed and turned away, admitting that she had slept with Bob the night before my return. She explained that involving Harper was meant to add insult to injury. Curious about the expected outcome of her actions, I questioned if Barbara anticipated my forgiveness for what she had done. She responded by expressing her belief that the revenge plan would even the score and allow us to move on. My reaction was another fit of laughter. I pointed out that even if I had been cheating on her, she never caught me in the act. I acknowledged the potential pain she might have felt upon hearing about the alleged affair, but emphasized that she didn't have concrete evidence. You never saw me even talking with another woman, let alone being with one. Instead of confronting me about your suspicions, you decided to get revenge. Your plan was to stimulate me, tie me to the bed, and make me watch you with 2 guys, one of whom used to be my best friend. This whole scenario was meant to humiliate me, and you thought it would make us even. Most wives would have had an affair if they wanted revenge. What you did went way beyond that. And even if I had cheated on you, I couldn't forgive you for what you did. Barbara dropped her head, sobbing. Please give me another chance. I love you. I've always loved you. You're the only man I've ever loved. I didn't mean to hurt you. What I did with Bob and Harper was just bad relationships. It had nothing to do with love. Please, can't I do anything to make you love me again? I'll do anything if you'll just give me another chance. Barbara, with wide-open eyes and tears streaming down her cheeks, pleaded with me. I couldn't bear to see her cry. Did you really mean it, Barbara? Did I mean what she asked? Did you mean it when you said that you would do anything I asked? Barbara tried to wipe away her tears. Yes, I meant every word of it. I'll do anything you want. I slid out of the booth, stood up, placed my hand on Barbara's shoulder, and bent down so my mouth was close to her ear, saying, "Drop dead." Barbara's head fell onto the table and she continued crying. I could still hear her crying as I walked out the door. 7 months later, Clara and I got married.